Hello, Hornets. Welcome to the Distance Thinking Podcast. Sorry for the delays, a little technical difficulties. I'm sure you guys are not familiar with technical difficulties here working at Hamilton Township. All right, well, we're getting towards the end of the school year, so I'm really struggling to find some new things to talk about. I think it's about time of the year we're going to reflect. So I'm bringing back my first guest, a little bit late. That's my fault. Amanda Wegman. Welcome, Amanda.
Hi everybody. How's it going out there? Hope you're good. Sorry, I'm all washed out. The light in this room is weird. I don't know how to fix it.
That's probably the sunlight. All right, well, we actually polled the audience to try to get some questions. I'm trying to get a little bit more interaction. We've been doing this now for how many weeks? I know you probably have it stored in your head. 8 weeks about?
Yeah, distance learning. I think this is week 8, I'm pretty sure.
So, I mean, I'm trying to think a little bit like in regards to next year, both in if this happens again, we never know as far as like another breakout or what the situation is going to be in September, or even walking back into the classroom. I was really excited in the beginning because I think a lot of teachers were coming to me and they were excited about some of the things that they're learning. So what have you learned outside of the technology thing? What have you learned about your teaching?
So I think outside of all of the tech aspects, the one thing that I've learned is that I definitely have a breaking point as far as my empathy and understanding and my willingness to be flexible and bend goes. And I think that's probably true of all of us. And I don't know, I'm just learning that I'm super flexible and understanding and I want to reach out to kids, but there's just a point that comes where I think I've learned I really still have to hold expectations. And I also think that it's important that everybody does that. I mean, I don't know, even in times like this, research shows that low expectations have bad ramifications for students, especially students that are low income or students in certain racial groups or ethnic groups, which is a large part of our population. And I just kind of feel like I'm noticing more and more that it feels like in this situation, we're perceiving problems that we think people are having that some of them aren't actually having. And I don't know. I don't want to go off on a tangent.
Give me an example.
I think that we're assuming that a lot of our students are having either socioeconomic issues or family issues or access issues, and a lot of them are. I mean, don't get me wrong, but I think the fact that we, as the people that we are assuming that they're having all of these issues is its own problem. And I think that us responding to those issues by just eliminating expectations is just going to have negative long-term effects on our students.
I mean, this is the hard part for me because in response to these issues, I feel like the district itself is setting out expectations where now you're taking 2,000 kids and you're fitting them into one category. And for me, I was just think it's really about how well you knew your students going into this. Yeah. So a lot of it to me is about the relationships that you have. So, but then there's always the part in my head that sits there when I'm about to yell at a student or send them something that A, I'm sending it now in an email.
Right.
Whatever, and B, what if I'm wrong? And then I'm going to
I mean, yeah, there's that too. I just think as a whole, not us as individuals, but as a whole, I think that we just need to be aware of some of the implications of us making assumptions and then those assumptions turning into lowered expectations. I mean, I don't know.
Okay, so you're a first-year teacher, and in a lot of ways, I think that's the hard part about this is you almost feel like a first-year teacher again. And now you're going to go into the summer and pretend like you've had a little bit of time to reflect on this distance learning. And you go into next year and you say, all right, well, if I'm starting off in September and we're still doing distance learning, how am I going to set the expectations from day one to be what I want, as opposed to just being thrown into this and you feel like, shoot, I made that mistake?
Yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot. And also Kelly just commented that she finds it harder to keep up rapport virtually. I agree. The other thing that I've learned is that, I don't know, this kind of just makes me sad. It feels a little bit like the relationships that I had with my students seemed like they are more important to me than they were to some of them. Just like in the amount of people that I thought like we had a nice rapport, and now I can't get them to respond to me. So that's been a little disheartening. But as far as like
Not
reflecting and
you, it's
going,
Matt that they hate.
no, I know. But I mean, as far as reflecting and going into next year, I think that it's tough. And I think what needs to happen is that as a school or as a district, we need to be included. We need to include more people in decision-making processes, because I think the issue that we're having right now is a lot of us teachers worked really hard to establish expectations and establish routine and start to figure things out. And then the school district stepped in and it kind of feels like they blew some stuff up on us. And I think that if this needs to happen in September for it to be successful, there needs to be a committee of people that sit down, like all different people, teachers, guidance counselors, administrators, students, parents. Like there needs to be a committee that sits down and says, this is how we need to do this, like in a way that holds expectations while also honoring the difficulties that everybody's experiencing. But we can't have 1,000 teachers in a school district doing things 1,000 different ways and expect that to work. But we also can't have a school district step in a month later and say, oh, listen, everybody, here's how we're going to do it.
Yeah. I mean, I just, even with me, I actually feel like I'm grading harder online. Like, I think my kids are getting stressed out because I'm actually giving more like direct feedback because it's the only way for me to interact. So instead of interacting as a person to person, I'm interacting as a teacher to assignment. And it's just a very different relationship. So like I did the Google Meet one day just to say, like, I know you guys hate me right now because all the feedback I'm giving you, it just seems so negative. Like, let's just sit and talk and, and I already have that relationship. I couldn't imagine starting in September how to develop those relationships.
I think that's something that's going to take a lot of time and thought and effort, is how to even consider forging those relationships virtually if the time comes.
I have another question just from my experience. Like, okay, so in the beginning, for me, I was kind of excited, and you kind of live in my world in some ways where you probably more so, where you watch like 7 billion podcasts and you're taking classes and doing whatever. And I was excited to try new things, and I felt like there were people trying to try new things, and students were a little bit more accepting. But then there's also a part of me that every now and again, with all the emails or seeing some of the things where I feel like I'm not doing enough, and it's just like, and I get like this anxiety feeling of like, I'm not a good teacher because like, have you experienced that? And B, what's kind of your approach to like, just, okay, calm yourself down?
I have experienced that every day of my teaching career, whether we were in school or out of school or remote or in person or whatever. B, I think right now, like, you really just need to hone in on the 2 or 3 things that are working for you. Like there's always, especially right now in this world of ed tech, where every organization and every company is sending you a million emails, you can't use everything. And even if you wanted to use everything, that's not going to benefit your students. I think I always knew this, but this has solidified for me, is that it's really not helpful for you or them to try to use 12 different tools. Like you need to pick the things that work for you and that work for them, and that allow you to give them the feedback that you need to give them, or for them to be able to do what they're going to do. Because I just think that I think that part of being a good teacher is always being able to evaluate the resources that you're using, and whether resources means an activity you're doing in class or some website that sent you an email. You just have to pick and choose which ones are going to work for you. But I feel like the mark of a good teacher is somebody that never thinks they're doing enough. So I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing for those of us, which is probably everybody in this podcast right now, I don't think that's a bad thing to think you're not doing enough. I mean, you just have to recognize that there's limits.
Yeah, I mean, I just think once you get out of the structure of your routine, where you're familiar with, okay, I'm going to try something new this unit, and you're rewriting whole units and you're just starting from scratch all over again, which is, it's almost like being a new teacher again. And I just feel like it just comes on you in a different way a little bit. But let's transition, talking about some of the tools. The first tool the tool that you said has been the most helpful for you has been Edpuzzle. And we've talked about it a little bit. So just going to give you an opportunity. Again, teachers, we're not throwing billions of tools out there. It's just one that works for Amanda, and
yeah, I still have really enjoyed Edpuzzle. I do think it's something that could have applications even if we were face-to-face teaching. But I don't know, since we talked, the more I thought about this, I feel like it's not so much a tool that has become most useful to me, but the idea of digital skills. And I think that what this has made me think about is moving forward. I think that I will be making it more of a point to help my students learn how to use the digital tools that they have properly, and not just in case this type of thing happens ever again, God forbid, but just so that they know how to use tools, because I think that's an important part of being alive in 2020.
Yeah, I mean, for the students who are working themselves through this, who had bad technology skills, I wonder if those are some of the ones who checked out and they just say they don't have a computer, it's just their tech skills, and it would be highly beneficial for them to learn them, obviously.
Yeah, like here's how you use basic Google stuff. Here's how you scan and upload a document. Even like something, I think they need to know more of where they should go when they don't know how to do something. Like, how do I Google how to do this? So what this has brought to light for me is less of specific tools that I didn't know about before and more of a need to establish those skills across the subject areas.
Now, is it just digital skill instruction, or like digital literacy, like learning because you don't have them searching the internet a ton, right? Like getting back information and.
Garzio is asking, how should we approach this?
In regard to Garzio's question, like me personally as a teacher, like as a history teacher, I was like against getting into like lecturing, and then I got back into teaching, and then all I did is lecture again, because it was just I couldn't find resources and tools to try to enhance. So like I just went back to the basics, and like then I'm using Edpuzzle, and it's funny because I use Edpuzzle to kind of do what I did in the classroom and to transition my teaching, and I listen to myself lecture, and I'm not even kidding. I'm like, this stinks. It's so boring, and this is not a way to learn.
But I mean, I think that we just need to come to terms with the fact that us in our computer screen is not going to be the same us in person. Like, that's just impossible.
But what this helped me learn about my teaching is I've been trying to cut my information lecture parts to like 5 to 10 minute bits, and then intersecting them with activities. And I think that will really help in the classroom too. And like, even if we go back next year to digitally, like I've been much better at slowing down my instruction because I'm listening to my own self speak, as opposed to being in the class where I know sometimes I'm not clear and they don't understand me.
So I think to his point about how should we approach the start of the next school year, I think the two most important things would be making an active, concerted effort to find ways to digitally connect, like meaning those things that you would do the first couple of days of school. I don't know what you guys do. I'm not much of a let's talk about rules and hand out textbooks person the first couple of days of school. I don't do that. I do activities to like start talking and doing stuff together. So I would think the way that we need to approach the beginning of a year would have to be, how can we make those connections digitally? How can we make that happen without being face to face?
I'll ask you, and I'll ask the audience, like, well, give me some solutions then, because like it's not easy. Like Google Meet's like a little bit too much now, and we're gonna talk about that in a second. So hold off on the Google Meet. But it's really hard to get the interaction going online.
It is, yeah, but I think that's where our focus is going to have to be. Like, I'm not saying I know how I would do that. I'm just saying that's how I would approach it, is that my number one primary concern would be, how can I start to make connections? And my number two would be, and this isn't an individual teacher thing, but I think as a group, we need to approach it as like, what is the plan? How can we all be on the same page about how to structure things and then put the plan in motion, as opposed to like, you know, if a kid has 8 different teachers in a day and 8 different teachers are structuring things 8 different ways, that's a lot. So I think that we need to focus on that too.
Come up with a plan somehow to make attendance to, in some extent, mandatory.
Yeah, they do.
I need to see students digitally online and have a time. Maybe it's not as much or as often, or maybe it's, you know, I don't know. I mean, it's hard because it's not like we're going to be planning for a full school year of it or a half school year, because if it was a full school year and I had 3 preps of honors history, I would just put them in one classroom.
Right. But we don't, it's hard too, because we don't know. We don't know what the future is, what the timeline is.
Mary Kanock asked, would an intro video of Flipgrid work? Now, have you used Flipgrid?
I've never used Flipgrid. I've seen it used a lot. I've thought about it. It's never seemed like the best way for me to do something. So I've never used it. But I think that's a good idea. I think that something like that might be a nice idea.
I was thinking that it's the first tool that I go to too. And then I watch the videos on how to use it, and I'm like, I just can't tie it together with an idea yet. Yeah. And then I'm like, am I going to take the time to use a tool and teach a tool if I'm not really going to use the tool?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I definitely think there's something there. I just haven't figured it out yet. So.
Yeah, I agree.
Kelly Sopko says her first grade teacher uses it. Does she like it? Is it good? What have you learned? Come on, Kelly. All right. Well, as Kelly's responding, we're going to move on to just Google Meet quickly. All right. So I'll just give you kind of my experience. You use it more than me. Math is way different. I noticed with me, as once students weren't showing up, I'm not going to record it because it was too impersonal. I'd rather do the videos along my activities and send it in that way. I've been using it more for office hours, and students haven't really taken advantage of it as much as I would like. There's very few times where I've sat and talked. So I'll just make it mandatory, or I'll make it extra credit sometimes, and just to sit and talk and get the face-to-face connections. So I haven't gone into the depth of use that you have. So just tell me how you're using it, the different ways you're using it, and kind of like the different levels, if you've noticed any differences.
Yeah.
And then at the end, we're going to talk about some of the enhancements, because I know you have them.
Yeah, so first, let me just say that personally, I got called out for saying that a Google Meet was mandatory. I wasn't actually counting anything against them. I just wanted to get their attention. And it worked because 13 out of 16 students showed up. Miraculously, they all had access and were available at that time. But I did get called out on it. So proceed with caution if you're gonna do mandatory meets, anybody. So anyway, so yeah, the last 2 weeks when they came out with the schedule, I started holding class at the actual times that they gave. So I have found that in my A-level classes, students are coming, like the ones that need to come and want to come are coming, and they're coming whether that's for class or whether that's just to ask questions. Interestingly, my freshmen, I have an Algebra 1B class of freshmen, and I would say 3 times as many of them are showing up now that it's like an actual class versus just drop-in office hours, which is really interesting. I guess they just felt weird before dropping in. So I've used it for office hours and I've used it for actual class. So what I like about holding an actual class is, depending on the group of kids, I'm getting more participation that way. What I like for office hours, obviously, is that they can just drop in. So what I do when I have class is they all come on. I share my screen. I have a little tablet thing that I plug into the computer so that I can write on the smartboard. So it looks just like a smartboard would look in class. Like it's exactly the same thing that would be on the screen in class. And then I talk, I
Did
write.
you do that?
I bought it, yeah, on Amazon.
How much does that cost?
I think it cost me like $50.
And then do you need to install software?
No, you just plug it in with USB.
So it would work on a Chromebook?
Yes, it would work on a Chromebook, because anything that has a USB port, I think you just plug it in. I'm pretty sure. It's like the kind of thing that a lot of people that do like digital art and like graphic design use for stuff, but I use it for math. It's actually the same kind of similar thing to what the people at Khan Academy use to record their videos. It takes a little getting used to, but it's been super helpful. Like, I don't know how else I would do this without something to write on.
Now, have you tried the Google Whiteboard like add-on or extensions for me?
I opened it up and I looked, but honestly, if I can share my screen and it's smartboard, and that's what I usually use in class anyway, that's what I'm going to stick with.
But can the students write on it? So how do you get the students to write, and then you can't do that?
I haven't done any of that yet. I actually was really disappointed that we couldn't use Zoom anymore, because Zoom has a lot more capabilities. Like, they even have breakout rooms and stuff that we could have used, and kids can annotate the screen, but it is what it is. I don't know, too. The other thing is, with the fact that we have to record every lesson that we teach, I don't know that I'm super comfortable like asking kids to be doing work while I record them, and I don't know.
Technically, I mean, someone pointed out that that's illegal, that to record lessons with students in the actual classroom and post them, but somehow our district's asking us to do that.
Yeah, so just for if anyone's interested, right before I start recording in every lesson, I always just say to them, just so you guys know, again, I have to record this. So that means if your video's on or you speak, then your voice or your face will be recorded. So if you don't want it to be recorded, shut off your video, mute yourself. And then what they'll usually do is type in the chat. So I kind of keep it so that Smart Notebook is like 2/3 of my screen, and then the little chat is like right on the side, so I can see them asking me questions or answering my questions. Some of them don't care if their voices get recorded or whatever, so they'll just talk. But
now, okay, so like I said, my use of it right now has been limited. I might have to actually make them come or ask them politely to come to my class and just mess with different tools. One of the things I really wanted to do was to have them do like research and then do a debate and meet, with not even recording it, where I can mute them and then like call on them and they have to present like facts and support it. But I haven't messed with the extensions too much.
So tell
me some of the extensions that you've used.
You know, I haven't used as many of I was using the grid view, but now there's a grid view integrated, so I haven't really messed with that. I like that they added in the little like thumbs up, thumbs down, all that stuff. I will say that I had a reading. So my computer science class did reading of like a chapter in a book that we've been using this year. And we met via Google Meets to talk about it. And there's only 5 of us. It's a very small class. There was only 5 of us. And it was challenging to have an actual discussion, because again, they're not used to using tools. So they're not used to like muting themselves, and there's all this background noise, and then they talk.
I try to mute all of them, and I can mute them, but then they can unmute themselves.
And you can't unmute them.
Yeah, so
you can mute them, but you can't unmute them.
Oh, I can't unmute them?
No, they can only unmute themselves once you mute them. So it was like a good idea, but then it was just a challenge. Like, so if anybody wants to try that, I would not discourage it, but I would just say be prepared for it to be a little bit of a mess probably the first time that you try it. And maybe like lay out some norms, some ground rules for like participation.
And I would say one of the things is like maybe like if we're talking about that we want to do it, there's a good chance that come September, Google's going to have tons of changes if this is last thing. So I would definitely recommend to some teachers, if like, especially with Google products, get into it a couple weeks before September and see what the changes are. Because even with Google Classroom, I guarantee they're going to roll out some changes to make your life easier. But if you're not aware of them, it actually is probably going to make your life a little more difficult in the beginning as you've gotten familiar with it.
I'm with you, Kelly, about asking them to come for live lessons and none coming. My Algebra 2B classes has had like participation of 2 kids out of 40. And I just said, I'm not doing this. I'm not going to sit here for 2 class periods. I'm just going to pre-record my video and upload it to Edpuzzle the way that I was before. Mary, I don't think you can edit. You can't edit like directly in Google Meet, but you could, of course, use it's just like a regular video that gets exported. So you could use any video editing software if you wanted to edit it.
And that's one of the reasons why I'd rather use Screencastify or I use Loom, is because after you record a Loom, you can edit it right after it. So it makes presenting your lessons so much easier in that way. So, all right. So any other questions on Google Meet before we move on? All right, the next thing that I wanted to talk about is alternative assessments. And this is something that's been around for a while as far as theory-wise, and I still find it really difficult in practice. I mean, if I'm doing an essay, I have my format of some individual practice, formative to an ultimate summative. I do think, and teachers, please comment here, that giving a multiple choice test online has a lot of pitfalls. And I do think that as we rethink how we teach next year, that doing alternative assessments is part of how we need to think. And I don't think it's necessarily easy.
I don't think so either. My thing is I can't really speak for other subjects. I know like I've never given a multiple choice assessment in my math classes. So it's not really that I'm struggling with. It's more the fact that there are like apps and things that they can just copy work from the app or copy work from each other or whatever the case may be. So for me, it's been more of trying to find ways where I can be sure that they are authentically able to do their work and explain what they're thinking. So for me, that's meant things like, instead of just saying solve this problem, just asking them to either give an example of something, explain it step by step, or find an error, do some error analysis, stuff like that. I don't know. I don't pretend to be an expert, and especially not on any other subject. So
Kelly says the tough thing of alternative assessments for me is the application of skills, and she can't get to understand the basics. And then usually on top of it, if it's an alternative assessment, then you need to teach a technology skill too. So you're teaching content, you're teaching a skill related to your content, and you're teaching a technology skill, usually all in one thing. So, I mean, that's where I really feel like you need to have a plan from the beginning to the end, where in the beginning they just play with the tool, but you're not grading it closely, and they're having fun with the tool in a fun way. And then that's what, like, one of the things that I get upset about or rally against are like the choice board things, where teachers or like are recommended to give 6 choices of activities that they've never done before. To me, it's always the best to introduce an activity, let them feel comfortable with it, and then as you have introduced more activities of them just doing that activity, then you can give them choices of activities they've already done. But not all teachers agree with me on that one, so
I don't know. About the comment about the grading, I have really mixed feelings about the whole thing, because to be completely honest, the students of mine who are just logging on and doing the work and doing what I ask of them, which to be honest is about a quarter of what they would be asked of in school, their grades are better than they've ever been. It's like the averages of kids who are just doing what they're supposed to do are very good compared to what they might have been the previous 3 marking periods. So I'm sort of like, I don't know if anything needs to change necessarily with the grading scheme, there just needs to be a way for us to get the kids that aren't doing anything to do it.
I mean, I think the one thing that would help is if we were allowed to give class participation as a higher percentage of their grade, like as a summative, which technically we're not allowed to do. If class participation is just like individual practice, that means that it's like the stuff they're doing in class, but that means they don't need to show up to our online meetings as long as they're doing the work. I would like to make the online meeting somehow part of their grade.
Right.
Now, whether like I usually do it where they start with a B and have to like participate enough to get an A, I'd like to do that online. But if I made it a summative, and for in class, I usually make it a formative, which is pushing it. If I made it a summative, I know there probably would be kickback on that if someone didn't do it.
Yeah.
So, no, adding to that. I don't see our grading system changing, and that would be another thing I think that would just kind of confuse teachers too. I know I give a formative to an individual practice just because I want them to work harder on it because the skill level of the assignment's a little bit harder. And I give a summative to some formatives and just grade them as a summative because I'm going to grade them closer and spend more time. But that's not really what a summative is.
Right.
A lot of
I honestly think that this issue with the grading and the percentages and the formative summative, like, way predates remote learning in our district because we have a very complicated view of what formative and summative assessments are. And I think that remote learning is maybe just like exacerbating it, and the fact that we keep getting conflicting information about what to do and how to count things and what to assign and what not to assign. But I honestly just think at the end, like, I honestly think at the end of the day, you still more or less have the control over how things are going in with your students and their grades. So it's like, if I see that a student who's actually trying really hard is still getting like a C and I think they deserve better, then I'm going to do what I've got to do to make them get a better grade.
Yeah, I always feel bad doing that though. I always feel like one of the things that I hated as a student, like say you take an English class, like I knew I got worse grades on things because teachers didn't like me in high school, just because I was loud in class or whatever. And I always like didn't like that. So
no, I'm saying the opposite.
Well, no, but I'm saying like I always just try to be consistent with how I grade and feedback because I think like if you're inconsistent, like what I notice, like early on, like I give a lot of feedback, but I grade things easy. And they are like, oh, he's just going to be easy. They don't get that I'm trying to like scaffold their learning and I'm not going to take off points for things. So it's like, then when I come down hard and grade things, then they learn that skill when like months before I wasn't getting that positive response. And then as soon as I start grading harder, they actually start working on the skill that I want them to work on.
So 2 responses to that, and then that's all I have to say, is one, your experience is specifically with honors students right now, and they react a little bit differently.
Yeah, I know.
And the other thing is, I don't necessarily feel this way 100% of the time. I just feel this way about the situation that we're in. Like during remote learning, if there are students who are trying their best but are struggling to understand the content, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and like do what I need to do to help them get whatever they need to get, not in so many words. And I definitely don't feel bad about that.
Yeah, I probably do that too, but it's just a difference between how I grade and where I give those opportunities. Like sometimes it makes me mad with that student who tries hard and then won't show up to the meet, or like when I'm giving away points, or like won't do this and then we'll have things late and then say like, can I have help? And like sometimes like I have a class where someone is in honors and I understand that they're just really struggling with what I'm asking them to do and they're trying, but like that's where I'd never know where to like, all right, give me a little more effort on where I'm just giving away points. Don't just wait until you realize you don't understand it. I don't know, it's just hard. Like sometimes it makes it hard to grade when kids are just so lost. And I think that's what Kelly's trying to say. Like if I'm doing an essay and their writing is just so poor that they just don't understand and they're trying, it's hard to scaffold them through that when, you know, the other 75% of the class is just flying through it and understanding it.
Yeah, there is just a part of me that thinks like with all of this, at the end of the day, regardless of the 9,000 directives that we get, we all just need to use our best professional judgment for each one of our students.
Okay, let's go to the more fun stuff. All right.
What's the more fun stuff?
So I like to segue to say, like, I mean, one of the reasons why I think we're here is as teachers, or even in our profession, as teachers, we're learners. Sometimes we forget that, and we love to learn. And like even outside of teaching and the content that we learn, we tend to be more interesting people than I think that they imagine that we are. And what are we learning? So I think this is one of the fun things that we kind of started last week. Did you want to open with recipes, podcasts, or books?
Okay. Well, let's see. My recipes are too numerous to name. All I do is cook and bake. I've been baking a lot of bread, so I'll skip the recipes actually. I have a number of book and podcast recommendations if anybody is into these sorts of things. So since the beginning of the year of 2020, I've been on this self-imposed challenge to read 20 books in 2020. And I have read some good ones. So I'm just going to rattle off some names for anybody who's interested and like maybe a brief sentence about what they're about. So I just finished a book called We Were the Lucky Ones, and it is fiction, but it was very closely based on a true story of a Jewish family during the Holocaust. And I thought it was very good. It was actually like a unique perspective from what you usually hear, because you got to see what happened to all these different family members, and all the different family members had a very unique experience. Also, I read something called This Is How It Always Is, which was about a family who had it was fiction again. They had 4 boys, and then they had a 4th boy, but that child turned out to be transgender. And the whole story was about kind of like the issues that the family went through, and they had to like move and all of this stuff. And I thought it was really, really good. And the last one I would definitely recommend, especially if you're into Jodi Picoult. She's written a million books, but it was called Small Great Things. And it's basically like a big commentary on things like race, privilege, justice in a really unique setting. I highly recommend it. It's called Small Great Things.
That's your book list?
That's my book list. So We Were the Lucky Ones, This Is How It Always Is, and Small Great Things.
Now, I got to look at mine because, like, explain to people who read a Kindle how people who read a Kindle never know the titles of the books they're reading.
Yeah, I had to look up these titles. I keep a list in my phone for my 20 in 2020 challenge, and I also keep it on like Goodreads because I never know the titles because I've been reading them all on my Kindle, and you don't see the title while you're reading, so I always forget what book I'm reading.
So Alberta, since you are listening, I just finished A Long Petal of the Sea by Isabel Allende. I don't know if you've read it, but I think Alberta, you would really like it. So that would be a book that I would recommend to you, Alberta. It opens up in Spain during the Spanish Civil War, and it follows a family all the way to Peru, out of Peru into Venezuela, and it's really, really, really good. The book I'm reading now, The Famished Road, which I don't think is for everybody. It's really strange, but I actually couldn't put it down last night. I had to force myself to go to sleep because I just want to know what happens. But it's by an African author who, the premise is that the main character basically lives in heaven and is destined to always die young as a baby. And this is the one time in their life that they fight it and they actually live. And the people who are in the spirit world or whatever are constantly trying to trick the little boy into dying because they want to be back. They want him back in heaven with him. So it's really pretty interesting, and it takes you through like African history in a way that is just so magical. It's like part of that magical realism if people are into that. It's definitely kind of strange and not for everybody. It's not like a real like linear read, and there's just stuff happening where you don't know whether it's reality or not reality 90% of the time. So, but I'm really enjoying it. So, any podcasts you want to talk about or no?
Yeah, can I share my screen and just show the list?
Yeah, Garzio wants to know because he's like all about podcasts right now. If you share the screen, I just got to put the share screen up. And if you guys are interested, I could put these on my site. I'm Malcolm Gladwell.
Is my screen showing? Yeah, okay. So I listen to a million podcasts. I prefer to listen to podcasts over music when I work out. So I listen to them like every morning. So these are just some that I've liked recently. So The Daily from the New York Times, it's usually about a half hour and it's like a snippet of news, but it's sometimes offers like unique perspectives. Your Hustle is produced partially inside of a prison in California, San Quentin Correctional Facility. It's really, really good. Something I finished a while ago. You'll see a lot of true crime on my list. So I liked Up and Vanished. I liked To Live and Die in LA, and I liked Culpable. And then I also like Criminal, but Criminal is more like separate episodes than a full story. And they have some that are sort of dark and like serious crimes, and some that are more kind of fun or like funny almost, and like historical things, which is pretty cool. I also included Malcolm Gladwell, of course. He has a revisionist history podcast if you're into that sort of thing. And I put 2 education ones on there. I used to listen to the Google Teacher podcast all the time. I haven't listened in a while, but they usually offer really good tips and tricks for using the Google Suite products. And a lot of people have recommended Cult of Pedagogy's podcast, but I have not actually listened to that myself. So there's my list. I could go on for a long time about podcasts, but I'll spare you.
Garzio, Amanda's like really busy, but feel free to send her an email. It just might take her a while to get back to you. He has a whole list. He wants to do a podcast club, I think. I don't know where Garzio is getting the students who want to be in his podcast club, but he did send me a list of the podcasts that he is having them vote on to listen to. So
let's do it.
Yeah, I think this is a good way to like kind of, this is like one of the probably the best parts that is involved in this show is just talking about books and podcasts. And I'm also watching First Peoples on PBS. Really, really cool about like kind of using DNA. Garzio, I don't think I told you about it. I don't know if other people would be interested, but it kind of goes on each continent and talks about how Homo sapiens were able to, and DNA is kind of changing how we think about things. So it was really good. All right, he's doing it with his B-level science kids. So Garzio's one who's like just has fun, and I think that's part of it. Is like sometimes like you get beat down, and he just brings a positive attitude, and I think that's part of getting your kids interested in what you're doing right here. All right, any other questions from the audience? All right, I want to thank everybody for coming. I hope this is helpful. I'm not sure how much more I'm going to do this. I kind of feel like we're rehashing a lot of the same things. You know, I'll do it as needed if I do have an idea. I would like to do something on here for the seniors, but I guess that's been taken kind of out of my, that was an idea before the senior thing got out of, but do you have anything to say about that since you are involved in it or no? No?
I have nothing to say about that.
All right, staff.
Except for thank you to everybody who has volunteered to help out. That's awesome, which is probably everybody in this podcast right now. You're awesome.
All right. Well, thanks for everyone for coming. Thanks, Amanda, for being a guest. I know the people in this audience really appreciate the input and things that you have to say. Soon she'll be an administrator, and then we won't have to be able to talk to her on a level basis anymore. We're going to have to like stand up to and look at her on that high pedestal. I'm down here on that low pedestal. I will stay down here for now until eternity. Thanks everybody for coming. You can always come and talk to me. Please feel free to email. If I do get a lot of emails about a certain topic, I will be more likely to do a show. And go to my website. I did put Zoom extensions, a little video or an article about different Zoom extensions. Not Zoom, sorry, Google Meet extensions that you could use to enhance your experience there. You can flip through them and see if there's anything you like. Thanks a lot, everyone. Thanks, Amanda.
Thanks for listening to me ramble, everybody. See you soon.